My family said I failed. Then my sister's judge looked at me and said, "You're the governor." When I was 19, my sister told me I was an embarrassment to the family. She said it softly, but it landed like a blade. A week later, my father changed the locks. My mother left a bag of my clothes on the porch. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. They said I was reckless, emotional, unfit. But the truth is, I just couldn't stay quiet about what they did. For 15 years, I disappeared. I changed my name, cut my hair, erased every trace of who I was. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew they'd never let me rise if they knew I had. Then one afternoon, I walked into a courtroom where my sister was on trial. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The judge paused, squinted toward the back, and asked, "Wait, is that Camille Reyes? The governor?" Every head whipped around. My sister's mouth fell open, and in that suspended moment, all the years I spent buried under their silence cracked open into something else. They used to say I was a failure, but now the only thing louder than their silence was the sound of the world finally seeing me. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reached. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. And if my voice resonates with you, even a little, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. The air in San Antonio was thick with heat, and inside the Reyes home, it was thick with expectation. The family had gathered around the dining table, polished wood reflecting the soft glow of the chandelier above. It was a Sunday dinner, a tradition Manuel Reyes upheld with military precision. At the head of the table sat Manuel himself, retired police chief, patriarch, and commander of all things honorable. He raised a glass to Isabella, his firstborn, as her image flashed across the muted TV screen behind them. "That's my girl," he said proudly. District Attorney for Bexar County, and now featured on CNN, a real Reyes. Camille sat at the far end, fork poised over her plate, eyes downcast. No one looked her way. No one asked how her graduation went. She had walked the stage last week with a degree in humanities, not law, not pre-med. She hadn't even told them the date. She knew they wouldn't come. She had always been the strange one, sketchbooks instead of legal pads, Rilke and Simone Weil in her backpack. She read Philosophy in Parks, Painted at Dawn, and sat quietly through family meals like a distant echo of someone who used to matter. Camille was 23, brilliant in ways they didn't understand and never tried to. Then came the storm. It started with a ping on her phone, a text from a friend, then another, then a voicemail she didn't even want to hear. By the time she opened her laptop, it was everywhere. A private video of her, taken during spring break, was now public. Her face, her body, her voice, all stolen, uploaded, and shared. The one behind it? Her ex-boyfriend, bitter and vengeful after she ended things. She hadn't known he still had the video. Camille didn't even have time to cry before her world collapsed. Isabella found it first. That much Camille only learned later. She had sent it straight to Manuel with a single line. "You need to act before this gets worse." Not to protect Camille, but the family name. Dinner that night never happened. Manuel stormed into Camille's room, fury curling off him like smoke. "You think we raised you for this? For the world to see you like a dam?" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "I didn't post it," Camille choked out. "I was the one violated." "You violated the name Reyes," he snapped, tossing her university diploma onto the bed like a bill he refused to pay. "You want to live like trash? Then do it without my name, my roof, or my money." Her mother, Teresa, stood at the doorway, her rosary wrapped tightly around her fingers. She said nothing, wouldn't even meet Camille's eyes. Camille turned to Isabella, maybe hoping for something, anything, but her sister just stood still. Hands folded, gaze cold, not even a blink. Camille packed in silence. A few clothes, her sketchbooks, her journals, the red backpack she'd carried since freshman year. Sunlight filtered in through the blinds, slicing the room into shadows. When she walked into the living room, Manuel was waiting. He placed her bank card on the table. "Don't call, don't write." Her mother peeked from behind the curtain as Camille stepped out into the sweltering dusk. She didn't wave, didn't speak, just watched. The first week, Camille slept in her friend's car. Then her friend's kindness wore thin. By day 7, she was on a Greyhound heading north. Denver, maybe, or somewhere quieter. Somewhere no one would care who she used to be. On the second night of that journey, beneath an overpass just outside Santa Fe, Camille did something small and final. She took out an old leather-bound notebook, one that held family birthdays, home recipes, notes her mother used to leave in her lunchbox. She tore each page slowly and fed them to a small flame until there was nothing left but ashes. The night was still, the flame soft and hungry. I stood there, watching the ashes scatter in the hot desert wind, as if each burning page carried away a piece of the pain that bound me to that rotten past. But I knew that fire, however symbolic, couldn't erase what was etched into me: my mother's contempt, the disgust on my father's face, and the cold judgment of my own sister. That night, I slept on the hard ground, my body exhausted but my mind ablaze. It was there, wrapped in dust and abandonment, that I made my first real decision since being expelled. I would no longer hide. I would become someone so great, so irreversibly important, that the name Reyes would become a footnote in my story, not the title. In the following months, I worked as a waitress at a 24-hour restaurant in Flagstaff. I slept in the back room, where an old mattress shared space with food supply boxes and a noisy generator. Every tip I earned went into a separate account. I saved on everything, even soap. I bought used books, devoured philosophy, politics, sociology. When my shift ended, I studied until sunrise. Nobody knew me as Camille Reyes. My name tag said Ana, a simple name, without a past. But pain, that was my constant companion. It made me get up when my body wanted to give up. It reminded me of my father's words, "You want to live like trash?" and made me prove, day after day, that the trash he saw in me was actually the gold he was never able to see. When I got a partial scholarship to community college, I cried alone in the restaurant bathroom. That was just the beginning. Within 3 years, I was among the best in my class. My thesis was published. The university recommended me for an exchange program. I went to Washington. I never called anyone. I never looked back. In the capital, I was just another among young people hungry for the world. But unlike them, I had nowhere to return to. And that made me dangerous. I didn't accept less. I didn't apologize. I spoke with the precision of someone who had been silenced their entire life and was now heard in every word. I was noticed. Invited to participate in political projects focused on equity. I got involved in campaigns. I made noise. And when they told me I could run for smaller offices to start slowly, I laughed. I had already started from the ground. I wanted the top. Years later, when they announced my appointment as interim governor after the previous one's abrupt resignation, my face was on all the screens that once showed my sister. The difference? She was now the defendant. And I was the woman everyone wanted to hear. I entered that courtroom with the weight of a decade on my shoulders, but with my spine straight. I didn't go there for revenge, though it hung in the air like strong perfume. I went because I deserved to be there, because every swallowed tear, every cold night, every washed dish led me to that moment. And when the judge, recognizing my face, asked aloud, "Is this Governor Camille Reyes?" I didn't look at him. I looked at her, my sister, the one who called me a failure. She was pale-faced, her makeup smeared with fear. And there, for the first time, she wasn't the favorite, the promising one, the family's pride. She was just Isabella, a defendant in a case for bribery, evidence tampering, and willful omission. The entire room stared at me, but I didn't tremble. I smiled. And in that smile was everything they had denied me. It was milliseconds, but I saw it. I saw the world collapse in my sister's gaze. The woman who had always prided herself on controlling everything, from the family narrative to the secrets she buried with such zeal, now had no shields left, no protection, because I, the failure, was the person who could drag her to the bottom or let her drown alone. And the most delicious part of this irony was that I didn't even need to open my mouth to cause it. The judge repeated my name, now more firmly, and invited me to the front of the room as a prosecution witness. The prosecution knew I could offer important evidence about my sister's unethical practices, especially during the years when she silently manipulated testimonies and hid scandals involving public officials. I never wanted to be involved in this trial, but when they learned of my existence and my position, it was no longer a choice. Isabella tried to disguise it. She cleared her throat, adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck, and crossed her legs, as if she were still at an elegant dinner, not in a courtroom. But her eyes betrayed her. She was panicking, and seeing that gave me a peace I didn't know existed. I sat in the witness chair. The microphone crackled. They asked me to state my full name and profession. Camille Teresa Reyes, State Governor, I replied, with the most serene voice I had ever used. Murmurs filled the room. Some whispered. The judge ordered silence. Throughout my testimony, I was honest, precise. I detailed my sister's conduct patterns from the times when we worked in different agencies, I as a legislative analyst and she as a prosecutor. I knew about her schemes, the veiled threats she made to journalists, the obscure deals she closed behind the scenes. I never participated, but I took notes. And I kept everything. When the prosecution showed me a copy of an old email that Isabella had sent to a judge friend, suggesting to shield a case urgently, I took a deep breath. I had the original, with the attachments. I handed over everything. She didn't defend herself. She sat there, shrinking, as if each of my sentences was a public stab. Maybe it was. At the end of the hearing, I left without haste. I didn't wait for the verdict. I already knew what it would be, and that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the journey. Outside, the sun burned, and it was there, on the courthouse steps, surrounded by journalists, that I encountered my father again. Manuel Reyes was older, more hunched, with almost all white hair and the same rigid expression that expelled me from home years ago. He said nothing. He just looked at me. But now it wasn't superiority I saw. It was emptiness, as if he were facing a woman he didn't understand, a stranger who had once been his daughter. Camille, he murmured with a hoarse voice. Governor, I corrected. My name is Governor Reyes now. He opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg, but I didn't give him the chance. I need to go. Justice awaits me. And I left, not out of arrogance, but because now I was free. They no longer had power over me, and if they ever wanted to reach me, they would have to look up. On the way home, I opened the car's glove compartment and found something I didn't even remember I had kept. My mother's rosary. At the time, I had picked it up from the floor unintentionally when I left home for the last time. It was made of worn wood, with a simple cross, the beads smooth from use. I held that symbol between my fingers, not out of faith, but for memory. My mother didn't appear at the trial. Didn't call. Maybe she was sick. Maybe ashamed. Maybe nothing. That woman was a ghost in my life. Always there, but never for me. Always praying, but never protecting. Always afraid to act. I was not like her. I never would be again. That night, I watched the news alone with a glass of wine and my phone turned off. I saw my own image in the headlines. Governor testifies against sister in historic corruption case. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. But something inside me said that wasn't the end yet. It was just the beginning. The next morning, my name was plastered on the front pages of the country's main newspapers. The betrayed sister now commands the state's destiny. From excluded to leader. The headlines were sensationalistic, as always. But this time, I didn't care. It no longer bothered me that they used my pain as spectacle, because now it bore fruit. I was living proof that the ground they tried to throw me on could become a pedestal, if I used the right rubble to climb. Messages started arriving early. Secretaries, advisors, journalists, curious people. But among so many notifications, there was one that paralyzed me. Teresa Reyes. A simple message. I saw you on TV. I hope you were proud. There was no question mark, no longing, no affection, just judgment. As if she still thought I owed her some explanation. As if I had done all that to humiliate the family, and not to survive. I wanted to respond that I was proud, yes. That I was proud not to be like her. Not to have spent my life with eyes closed while her husband humiliated their daughter inside their own home. But I deleted the response before sending it. Some truths deserve silence. The same silence they gave me. The following week, I was called for a live interview, a nationally broadcast program. The team wanted to explore the contrast between me and Isabella, of course. Perfect opportunity, as they said. I accepted, but not to air dirty laundry. I accepted because I wanted to make one thing clear. I didn't get there out of revenge. I got there because they threw me into the abyss, and instead of falling, I climbed the walls with my fingernails. In the studio, the host, an elegant and falsely sympathetic man, tried to conduct the interview like a soap opera drama. He started with gentle questions and soon slid into the bait. Governor, how was it to look at your sister there, in the defendant's dock, after everything you experienced with your family? I took a deep breath. The cameras were on me. The entire country was too. It was like looking at a woman who finally had to face her own shadow. And I know that shadow well because I lived in it for many years. But I learned to transform darkness into roots. There was silence, a respectful silence. It was as if, for an instant, everyone there understood. That woman before them wasn't a victim seeking pity. She was a survivor who had decided to thrive. The interview went viral. I became a symbol of resilience, and however cliche it seemed, it moved many people. People who had also been excluded, silenced, discarded by their own families. People who saw themselves in my story. People who wanted justice, and not just in courtrooms. That's how Project Phoenix was born. A state initiative to welcome young people expelled from home due to family conflicts, discrimination, or abandonment. The idea was to offer shelter, psychological support, study scholarships, and professional training. I knew what it was like to sleep in a car, and if I had the power to prevent others from going through that, then I would do it. Of course, criticism came. Conservatives said I was rewarding juvenile disobedience, that I should focus on the economy, that my personal story was interfering with politics. But they didn't know, or pretended not to know, that politics is born from collective pain, that there is no fair management when you ignore the wound. And while I advanced with the project, Isabella's trial was coming to an end. On the day of the verdict, I was called as the state's representative. I entered the courthouse wearing the same dark suit from the first hearing, but this time with a brooch on my chest, the Project Phoenix symbol. It was my reminder that I wasn't there just for myself. I was there for all those who had already been kicked, forgotten, silenced. Isabella avoided looking at me. She was dejected, her face swollen, makeup smeared. The prosecutor read the crimes: evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, illicit favoritism, among others. The judge declared the sentence 17 years in prison in closed regime. She cried, but I didn't. Not out of coldness, but because that crying came too late. Upon leaving, I was surrounded by reporters. One of them, young and anxious, shouted, "Governor, do you think your sister deserved this sentence?" I stopped, looked directly at the camera. I think no one deserves to be destroyed by pride, but she had every chance to do right. And she chose silence. She chose power. I know how hard it is to change, but I also know that when someone like her chooses to hurt and hide, it's the innocent who pay. I paused. I was one of those innocent ones. One of those, but I'm not anymore. And I continued on my way. But deep down, I knew my story with that family wasn't over yet. Not completely. Because what expelled me from home wasn't just contempt. It was cowardice. And cowardice is a disease that spreads. It starts with an averted gaze, grows in a whispered phrase, and before you know it, you're on your knees accepting silence as a sentence. I no longer accepted that. And as much as Isabella was behind bars and Manuel was silent before the cameras, there was a ghost that still lingered. My mother, Teresa Reyes, the woman who spent her life asking for silence in the name of peace. The same one who saw me being humiliated in the dining room and just clutched her rosary. Who saw me leave through the door with a backpack and never took a step behind me. She didn't appear in court, didn't send me any letter. Just that message, dry, loaded with judgment. But it was precisely that message that reignited something in me. Not hurt. I had felt that too much already. What I felt was indignation. That woman still thought she had the right to opine about what I had become, as if she had participated in the construction. So I decided to visit her. Not out of longing, not for forgiveness, but because certain doors need to be opened so we can truly close them. The house where I grew up was still standing. The same. The neglected garden. The same floral curtains. The gate with the latch that never worked properly. I knocked hard, not with violence, with certainty. I waited. When she opened the door, there was a second of confusion in her eyes, as if she couldn't assimilate the fact that the woman before her was the daughter she had discarded. I was different, of course. Stronger, firmer, with another posture. But it wasn't just that. It was as if she had never really seen me before. Maybe she had never tried. "Camille," she said finally with a low voice. "It's Governor now," I replied dryly. She lowered her eyes. And there, in that hesitation, I realized everything. My mother wasn't a villain. She was weak. Too weak to confront her husband. Too weak to protect her daughter. Too weak to truly love. "Why did you come?" she asked. "Because you never looked for me," I replied. "Because you pretended it didn't happen. Because you sent my clothes in a plastic bag and pretended it didn't hurt." She clutched the rosary tighter. Always the damn rosary. As if prayer washed hands dirty with omission. "I didn't know what to do, Camille. Your father, your husband, mother, your husband, and even if he yelled, broke things, expelled me, you were the mother. You were supposed to come after me. You were supposed to knock on the door wherever I was sleeping, hug me, tell me you loved me, but you just watched from the curtain, remember?" She didn't answer, her eyes filled with water, but I didn't cry with her. Not this time. Now it's too late, Mother. I built my world, without you all, and I only came back to say this. It's over. Don't look for me. Don't ask for interviews. Don't tell the neighbors you feel proud. Because those who feel proud protect. And you didn't protect me. That's all I wanted to say. I turned my back. I heard when she called my name, as if she wanted to prevent my departure. But I didn't stop, because that house was no longer mine. That story wasn't either. I left there with a light heart for the first time in years. Not out of revenge, but for justice. An intimate, silent justice that doesn't appear in newspapers. The justice of looking in the mirror and knowing you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Not to family. Not to God. In the following months, I immersed myself in work. Project Phoenix spread throughout the state, and new laws began to be proposed based on the pains that I and so many others had lived. In my administration, young people would no longer be discarded for thinking differently, for loving differently, for existing in an uncomfortable way. And then came the invitation that would change everything again. A position in the federal Senate, national, high sphere. The chance to change the country, not just my state. The numbers were in my favor. Public opinion, too. But with that came a ghost I didn't expect. Ghost. My father, Manuel. I received news that he had suffered a stroke. He was hospitalized, without speech, with the left side of his body paralyzed. And as much as the name Reyes still repulsed me, something inside me wavered. Maybe because, deep down, the wound between father and daughter never completely heals. Maybe because, even after everything, there were still unanswered questions. In the early morning when I went to the hospital, I entered in silence. He was unconscious, surrounded by machines and tubes. He seemed smaller, fragile. Nothing of the man who yelled at me. Nothing of the hard patriarch who threw my diploma on the bed like trash. I sat beside the bed. I looked at him for long minutes. Then I took a piece of paper and wrote, "You destroyed me. And even so, I won. I hope that, even in silence, you understand. Now, I'm going to govern a country, and you'll continue trapped in this bed, with your own hatred choking in your throat." I folded the paper, placed it beside the bed, and left. Without looking back. Without remorse. There were no tears. No weight. As I walked through the white hospital corridors, all I felt was profound relief. The pain that had accompanied me like a second skin for years finally detached from me. I no longer needed Manuel's approval, nor his pity, and much less the love that never came. Outside, the world continued. The sirens, the cars, the entire city kept turning. But inside me, for the first time, there was silence. My silence. Clean. Not the one my family imposed on me with contempt, but the kind of silence that comes when you truly close a cycle. In the following days, I concentrated on the Senate campaign. The dispute was fierce and the adversaries predictably dirty. They searched everything. My past, my story with Isabella, my old interviews. They used photos from when I still lived at the restaurant in Flagstaff, when I was a waitress with dark circles and scribbled notebooks. They tried to paint me as unstable, emotional, unreliable. But the effect was the opposite. Instead of destroying me, they reignited something powerful in people. My story spoke louder than any rumor. People from across the country began writing to me. Young people who were expelled from home. Silenced women. Men who rebuilt their lives after being discarded. They all said the same thing. You represent me. That's when I understood. The revenge, so desired in the beginning, was no longer personal. It had transformed into collective justice. I no longer wanted to see my family suffer. I wanted to see the system crumble. The system that protects perfect children, that embraces those who know how to smile pretty and pretend. The same system that abandons those who feel too much, who dream too much, who don't fit the mold. At the campaign's final rally, before a crowd in Austin's Central Square, the heat was suffocating. But I was there wearing white, the opposite of the mourning I had carried for years, and holding the microphone firmly. My name is Camille Teresa Reyes. Yes, Reyes, I repeated firmly. A name that expelled me, that shamed me, that tried to erase me. But I took it back. And today, this name carries another story. Mine. All of ours. The crowd applauded, cried, shouted, and that's how I won. The Senate was just the next step. When I took office, I was invited to international programs, human rights forums, meetings with leaders I had only seen on television before. But none of this went to my head, because I knew where I came from. I hadn't forgotten the sidewalk where I slept, nor the flame that consumed my childhood notebook under the Santa Fe overpass. But the most surprising thing happened on an autumn afternoon in the office. My secretary entered, hesitant. "Governor, there's a lady in reception, says she's your mother." It took me time to respond. For a few seconds, my entire body froze. Then I took a deep breath. "Send her in." Teresa entered slowly. Thinner, older, with tired eyes, but without the rosary. For the first time, without the rosary. She sat before me like an ordinary woman, without authority, without prepared excuses. "I didn't come to ask for anything," she said. "I just wanted to see you, to know if you still hate me." I didn't hate her. I had hated, yes, but what I felt now was something else. Something like pity, not in an arrogant way, but like someone who sees a little bird that could fly but spent its entire life locked in a cage it accepted. "I don't hate you," I replied, "but I can't love you for an entire lifetime alone." She nodded, her eyes welling up. "I watch everything. All the interviews, I read the projects. You did everything without us. Because you left me without you." She lowered her head. "I was never strong like you." "I know," I replied. "And that's what killed me inside for a long time, waiting for you to be." Teresa stood up, hesitated. Then she took a small box from her purse. "This belonged to my mother. I kept it to give you one day, when you were ready. The truth is, I was the one who was never ready." She handed me the box. Inside, an old brooch, golden, with the image of a phoenix in flames. I smiled with irony. "Funny, you have no idea how symbolic this became for me." "Maybe I did, even without knowing," she said. "Goodbye, Camille. Goodbye, Teresa." I didn't hug her. She didn't try either. It was a silent goodbye, but for the first time, honest. When she left, I stayed with the brooch in my hand. I placed it on the table. I didn't wear it. Not yet. Maybe someday. Maybe never. But in that instant, I knew. The cycle was closed. And the next day, I began writing the draft of my next bill, the Camille Reyes Law, so that no girl would ever need to be expelled from home for dreaming differently. The project's name was received with surprise. Many said it was too bold to name a law after myself. Others accused me of egocentrism, political opportunism. But for me, that wasn't vanity. It was survival engraved on paper. I wanted every girl who opened a law book, every young person who read a headline, every woman who fought to exist in her own way, to know that someone like her once sat on the ground, cried in hiding, was called a shame, and still wrote her own story in capital letters. The Camille Reyes Law would guarantee protection to young people expelled from home for moral, ideological, or affective reasons. It would offer emergency shelter, study scholarships, inclusion in the job market, and priority access to mental health. For the first time in the country, emotional family abandonment would be treated as a type of violence. The vote would be difficult. I knew, but I had already faced worse things than cold speeches from parliamentarians in starched suits. I had already overcome contempt with a fork in hand, an old notebook in my lap, and a flame burning inside my chest. They couldn't stop me now. During the voting week, my schedule was packed. Interviews, meetings, articulations. Even old allies hesitated. A senator told me the project was beautiful, but too idealistic. "Camille, the system doesn't work like that. You know this. Congress isn't made to fix broken families." I took a deep breath. "No, but it's made to protect those who are being broken by them." I went to the Tribune on voting day with the printed text in my hand. The plenary was packed. A mixture of curious, cynical, and hopeful looks. Among the faces, I saw young activists, shelter survivors, teachers, parents who had once learned to love differently. I asked for the floor. "Ladies and gentlemen, I didn't come here to talk about my pain. It's already known. But I came to talk about what comes after it. Because what brought me here wasn't public humiliation, nor years of silence, nor the cold of sleeping in a car with a backpack as a pillow. What brought me here was the desire that no one else should have to go through this. I spoke about statistics, about girls like me, about boys who commit suicide because they're kicked out of home for saying who they are, about children who grow up feeling they should apologize for existing. When a door closes forever, it's not just the room that's lost, it's identity, it's faith, it's self-esteem. What this law offers isn't a roof, it's a second chance." The silence was total. And when I finished, I didn't ask for votes. I asked for humanity. At counting time, I held my breath. Each number felt like a punch to the stomach. When the scoreboard lit up, with 54 votes in favor, I didn't smile. I just closed my eyes and thanked myself. The Camille Reyes Law was approved. That night, alone in the office, I went to the window. The city below was a tangle of lights, horns, people. Out there, I was a senator, leader, reference. But in there, with myself, I was the 19-year-old girl expelled from home with a plastic bag, who never had a real home but knew how to build a future. I took the phoenix brooch, the one my mother had left. I observed the figure of the bird being reborn from its own flames. Was there anger in me? Still. But there was something stronger. Conviction. I pinned the brooch to my coat. The next morning, I returned to where it all began. The childhood house, now abandoned. It was for sale, surrounded by weeds and old silences. I stood there for a few minutes in front of the broken gate, where my father once expelled me and my mother just watched. Then I called my team. I want to buy it. The house? No, the story. I bought the house with my own money, renovated it, tore down the back walls, transformed each room into a welcoming space. Psychologists, libraries, studios, listening rooms. I gave it a new name, Aurora Institute, because where there was once night, now there was a new beginning. And at the inauguration, before hundreds of young people with shining eyes, I said, I was discarded for being who I was. Today, you are here because I want you to be exactly who you are. No girl, no boy, no soul will ever be treated as a mistake while I'm alive. They applauded, cried, hugged me, and there, in that moment, I understood. My revenge was fulfilled, but not in screaming, not in humiliation. It was fulfilled in affection, in the space created, in the future being built with the ruins of the past.